All right, let's just get right into it. Here are the power rankings. At number 10, down one spot from last week, is Grant, the lowest scoring team in the league over the past 3 weeks, and it's looking just as bad this week. Amon-Ra St. Brown is on a bye. Mike Evans re-injured himself because, of course, he did, and Grant is now starting the Bears' backup running back. We've seen teams go first to worst before, so I guess this isn't like totally unprecedented, but man, this team is in rough shape. Other than Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan, and I guess Baker Mayfield, what else is there to be excited about? Your second-ranked kicker, I guess? Jesus. At number 9, down 4 spots from last week, is Scott. This may be the biggest drop this year, but as much as I've hyped up Scott's team, I'm finally admitting defeat, or at least temporarily. Jane Daniels got hurt and won't play this week, so Scott's using the timeless and elite Joe Flacco. Kamara has one single game this year over 100 total yards and hasn't scored since week 1. Terry McLaurin doesn't have his quarterback. Nick Chubb and Chuba Hubbard seem to have lost their starting roles and are now like rotational players, I guess. There's still plenty of solid pieces on this roster, but for this week, it's likely going to be pretty tough sledding for Scott. At number 8, down 1 spot from last week, is Kevin. In spite of Quinshon Judkins scoring literally 3 touchdowns against the hapless Dolphins defense, Kevin is the second lowest scoring team over the past 3 weeks and is now likely without Nico Collins. Now, I grant you that Kevin started 2 tight ends last week and got goose eggs out of both of them, which actually prompted George Kittle to issue a public apology to gamblers and fantasy managers alike. I've always said Kittle is truly a man of the people. Kevin's team isn't like really bad or anything. It's just had, I think, some down weeks. However, if this pattern keeps up, I may have to give him the Scott treatment and just tank him in the rankings even further. At number 7, up 1 from last week, is Dan. Dan has been a top 3 scorer each of the past 2 weeks, and that's awesome. What is not so awesome, though, is that running back continues to be a massive hole in his roster, and Dan knows a thing or two about a massive hole. Pacheco and Montgomery as your drafted RB1 and RB2 has really not worked out at all. Plus, RJ Harvey just sucks, and Charbonnet can't seem to shake Ken Walker. However, Dan has maybe the best tight end in football, plus the deepest wide receiver room in the league. Not to mention that Drake May is actually playing like legitimately good football recently. This likely isn't a roster that will win super consistently, but if these 2 running backs happen to like fall into the end zone on any given week, that may be enough to get more top 3 performances going forward. At number 6, in the same spot as last week, is Tim. The league average scoring is 109 points a game, though that's admittedly higher than the actual average because Chris is on a fucking warpath this year. Tim is scoring 106, which is probably actually the league average without Chris. Now, this is a good team with little to no weaknesses. However, Dowdle and Hubbard are literally splitting the backfield 50-50. Genty and Marvin Harrison Jr. on a bye. Golden and Smith both have great boom potential, but can sometimes completely disappear. I truly believe that when Bucky Irving returns, this team will get back to its week 3 and 4 scoring levels, where Tim hit 117 and 146 respectively. Just going to take some time. At number 5, up 5 spots from last week. That's too much. I'm probably going to regret this drastic of a movement, but it's me. I will note that it's hard to argue against 3 consecutive weeks of 117 each. On paper, I'm looking pretty good. I'm 5th in scoring. I'm essentially tied with Patrick for 4th. I'm less than a half point per week behind him. Like, I've got the number 1 fantasy quarterback. I've got Jamar Chase. And then you look at my wasteland of wide receiver 3s that are just all banged up. And probably, I'm relying heavily on the luckiest tight end of all time who just cannot stop scoring touchdowns. Plus my universally underperforming running backs like Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, Etienne, and fucking Breece Hall have combined for like 9 touchdowns all year or something insane. It's fucking terrible. Now, getting running back correct has been one of the things I've been consistently good at year over year. I basically nail running back every year. It's the one thing that I'm actually good at. And I just totally fucking whiffed this year, man. I just whiffed. And I have on fucking every one of them. Aside from Mahomes and Chase, I have a team basically full of question marks, and damn it, I need some answers. Number 5 is too high. I'm saying it right now. At number 4, same as last week, is Patrick. Like, okay, yes, Patrick has lost 2 of his last 3 games. However, he has still scored over 100 every week this season, except for 1, showing a really solid floor and good consistency. Plus, there are just a number of genuinely good players on this roster. And frankly, that's usually a good way to get wins in fantasy. Like Josh Jacobs, dog. JSN, dog. Tucker Kraft, dog. Jameson Williams, he has 5 games under 5 points, including a goose egg last week. Okay, so maybe the roster isn't perfect. And yeah, maybe Jalen Hurts can only actually throw the ball half the time he's on the field. Overall, this is still a team that is definitely contending for a playoff spot. At number 3, down 1 spot from last week, is Sam. I was correct that Rashee Rice would add something back into Sam's lineup, but it turns out that it wasn't adding, it was actually saving. Sam barely scraped by Patrick, fewer than 2 points actually, to preserve his 6-1 record. And now, while this definitely still is a good team, problems continue to linger. Puka and Bowers remain injured. Odunze has 2 catches each of the past 2 weeks. Aaron Jones is healthy again for now, at least. So Jordan Mason's role may take a hit. And most importantly, Barkley is stuck in a seemingly broken Eagles run game. Obviously, all these woes probably won't last forever, but right now, Sam's team doesn't feel maybe quite as invincible as it did 2 weeks ago. At number 2, down 1 spot technically from last week, is Jason. I mean, this team is just it's so unpredictable. Either Jason is losing while scoring in the bottom half of the league, or he's literally the top scoring team that week, which has happened 3 times out of 7 weeks already, by the way. That is the most in the league this year. Speaking of which, here's an interesting stat I found while poking around. Dan and I were the top scoring teams last year, 11 out of the 14 weeks of the fantasy regular season. 12 out of 17, including the playoffs. That's fucking insane. That's insane. And now, I issue you all a challenge. Without looking, Grant probably knows the answer. Without looking, try to guess how many weeks Grant was the top scorer last year, including the playoffs. I'll give you a hint. It's literally once. 1 single week saw Grant as the top scorer last year, and that was in week 17 when he had to have it, and frankly, he only outscored Dan, the number 2 scorer, by 1.5 points. Last year has to be the most undeserved championship in league history, except maybe when Jacob made the playoffs at 6-8 because we still had divisions, but even he was scoring points, and a couple weeks was the top scorer that week in the league. Grant did it fucking once, man. He only did it once. Sorry. I think I blacked out for a minute there. Anyway, Jason is missing 4 very important players from his roster that are averaging a combined 49 points a game between them this year. It does show, frankly, how deep Jason's bench is because, in spite of these 4 guys being out, his team still isn't, terrible. If I was missing 4 players, I wouldn't be fielding a starting roster. I might actually score 60. Aside from this really tough bye week, I think this team is still pretty stacked. And at number 1, up 1 spot where he finally belongs, is Chris. Bro, if Lamar is actually back this week, we may just want to go ahead and pack this season in, right? Chris's reign of destruction is continuing as he rides CMC and Jonathan Taylor, the top 2 running backs in fantasy, both of whom I passed on voluntarily to a 135 point per game average. Notably, he's beating his opponents by almost 35 points a game, which means mathematically that most teams are performing a little bit below average against him. Sure, yeah, he's getting a little bit of help maybe, but I can only assume that this is because other teams are literally trembling in their boots standing before this roster. I'm definitely looking forward to getting fucking reamed by Chris again next week in week 10. Either way, 2 weeks from now, whatever. Either way, I don't care. Chris can probably go 2-5 over the next 7 weeks and still make the playoffs with how he's scoring at the highest rate in league history thus far this season. Now, the upcoming matchups, we first have Chris versus Grant. We don't need to talk about it. Chris by 1,000,000. Secondly, we have Tim against Kevin. This one is, I think, actually probably going to be close. Frankly, though, I don't want to bet against Josh Allen coming off of a bye. Plus, Kevin's running backs have some pretty tough matchups, I think. The third matchup is Sam against Dan. Sam definitely has the better team overall, but something just feels off this week. Dan has been scoring well, and I think his Chargers could both have good games against the Vikings on Thursday. This one may be closer than we think. Fuck! Made it almost the entire recap without totally fucking something up, and then I did it. I don't even want to finish this shit. Whatever. Fuck it. Patrick and Scott is the next one. The big bearded boys face off, and thankfully Scott doesn't have to make a decision around Sam Laporta versus Ramondre Stevenson, which lost him literally both of his last two games. I have no idea, absolutely no idea who's going to win this matchup. I hope you both score 0. Lastly, we have me against Jason. I should have this one in the bag, but Jason, I'm telling you right now, pal, I swear to God, if Brashard Smith scores, I'm tying you to a leash in the woods behind my house. That is not a threat. That is a promise. Anyway, just a reminder also that the trade deadline is prior to the week 12 kickoff. We have literally had 0 trades in the league this year. I keep barking up a couple of trees, like a couple of y'all have players that I like, but I can't quite figure out even like an offer that I want to make because like we both either like have and need the same types of things, or I would have to way overpay or underpay. Like everything just feels a little off, and I think it's still too early in the season for me anyway to be throwing around picks for next year. I do have an extra 9th though. I don't know, if you want an extra 9th round pick next year, fucking hit me up. The week 12 kickoff is the trade deadline. Anyway, that'll do it for this week's recap. Good luck to everyone except Jason, and absolutely go fuck yourselves.